If you could lock in an NRL bet before the start of the season, which one would it be?
Realistically a higher chance of you winning some of those bets instead of trying to pick a premiership winner at the start of the year.
They're winning.
Never heard the Titan seasons these days being called outstanding, man. Now, I like the under on Brisbane, I think it's way too high. You're expecting them to do better, get more wins than what they did last year.
Hello and welcome back to bets.com.au YouTube channel. It's Sports Pez, Jez and Tuck Sports Takes back for bets.com.au. Looking at NRL futures win totals, Jez. How good is it that footy's back?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like all happening super fast. We can forget about the summer of cricket, the NBL. It's all about NRL and AFL for the next, 6 months. Absolutely pumped.
It's fantastic. In this episode, we're going to look at the win totals for the NRL, explain a little bit how the market works and where you can find some value. A little bit of a nerdy episode in terms of numbers from my perspective, but I brought you along as the bogan punter to be able to level it out a bit.
Needs to balance, mate. Otherwise, you can't be left alone. I can't be left alone. We'll find that common medium somewhere that hopefully people can relate to.
Some of the information that we're going to talk about today, I've already put in article form over at bets.com.au. We're going to pull them up on the screen a little bit later to go through them, but you're going to get pretty much a lot of the information there that we're going to go through so you can look at it in your own time. But one of the biggest questions right now to kick off the show, Jez, if you could lock in an NRL bet before the start of the season, which one would it be?
It's tough. There's I guess we're on the win totals train here, and it's probably an unpopular one for a lot of people, but the one I like the most is actually Manly over 10.5 wins.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Like they lost Cherry, of course, but Jamal Fogarty, is everybody just underestimating the influence that he has had even at Canberra and what they did? And now coming in, slotting in, Manly didn't lose much more than just Cherry. So if they stay healthy, 10.5 is a pretty low total for them.
We're going to explore a little bit further along here about how bookmakers need to set a number. Whereas when you look at it from a betting perspective, you can look at the range of where a team might end up and you get a lot more wiggle room, so to speak, in the choosing of your bet. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But first and foremost, the NRL win totals market. How does it work? So models generally dictate a lot of the markets that you see on a betting website or app, whatever you want to call it. Really deep models that data scientists and punters and sports people that know what they're doing have created these models and used them over time to create numbers. And a lot of it is based on a distribution of where a team might end up, but they have to, in the end, get to a number, and the bookmaker tries to hit the middle so that he's getting as much money bet on the under and as much money bet on the over, because they then just take that little 10 cents of odds in the middle to make their money. So that's kind of where the concept of creating a number comes from. And then they use data from previous years about players, about teams, about strength of schedule, home and away. There's so much data that goes into it. But it is, in the end, it's a person deciding on what is important in these data models to then weight them in a certain aspect to get a number. And luckily for us, we have similar models that probably aren't as deep or as important or as smart people working on them. Maybe. But what we try to do is find
short, buddy, I think. Yeah.
Find a number that goes quite close to what the bookmakers have, and then use our knowledge and opinion about the sport to try and figure out a side.
You're definitely underestimating your geekiness there, mate. I think you're right on the money. Give yourself some credit.
Like I said, there's going to be a little bit of nerd action in this podcast about numbers. But essentially, it's a two-way street. You're either going over or you're going under. There's not a lot of variance in what you can bet, which leaves us, as I said, a lot of room to interpret where the number is and think that it can go over or under. We're not choosing 3 or 4 or 5 different outcomes. Um, and that's, I guess, a little bit different to looking at a premiership betting market where any one of the 17 teams before a ball is kicked off can win the premiership. There's 17 different outcomes. There's 2 different teams that can make the final. There's a lot of variables to go into a premiership market, but a win total is simply 1 or 2. You following along up until this point, Jez?
I am. Thanks. You're doing a good job.
So when we get into a little bit more of how a team ends up at a win total, you're going to look at stuff like their expectation of how they're going to perform, their roster, strength of schedule, home and away record, how injuries affect them, stuff like that. So, and you're looking at that across the whole season. So, a sustained performance, or what could go wrong, or what could go right. One score games, do they win or lose those? A lot of that stuff comes into play here. Whereas, a team, and we look at this over a number of years, teams that win premierships often need a lot of stuff to go right. So to try and pick that one team where everything goes right for them is an extremely difficult choice to make, right?
You wouldn't have picked that it would have been Brisbane last year at the start of last season, would you? Because plenty went
No.
right for them. They survived the highs and the lows and Origin and everything. So definitely it's tough.
And picking a grand final winner as well, that means you have to figure out, okay, how do finals work? And, we know teams are brought much closer together in finals, and it can be the bounce of a ball, a refereeing decision, or whatever that can decide a finals game that gets you to a grand final and able to win. And I think that's kind of leads us into where a lot of punters make mistakes in betting futures markets. And it's trying to think too deeply about every single moment, every single one of these variables as its own, and not at the same time accepting that there are so many variables to get to that end point. And I think that's why win totals for each team are much easier, much funner market to bet, Jez, than say a top 8 or a premiership winner.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you a perspective of looking at all different teams and how they're going to perform over the whole regular season without all those small things that need to happen for them to maybe win the premiership. You might get some more value in picking the premiership winner, but it's a little bit like a multi-bet though, really, isn't it? Because it's like you can take more value by throwing in more variables to get more value. But if you just sort of back things down a little bit and find that sort of 190 market with an over and under and just stick with the one, you're more likely to eventually make more money. So having a few sort of over under bets throughout the whole season, I think it's much more enjoyable because you can ride the highs and the lows of each team. And then there's also realistically a higher chance of you winning some of those bets instead of trying to pick a premiership winner at the start of the year.
Exactly. I'm going to show you here this article, how the NRL win totals market actually works. Over at bets.com.au, I've broken it all down. Why win totals aren't ladder predictions, ceiling, floor, and volatility. Why the market struggles in predicting a range of outcomes. We touched on that. They have to pick a number, whereas we're looking at a range. A lot of geeky stuff in there, but some pretty interesting concepts to get you in the mindset of how then to bet a win total. And then I also have pulled out the win totals from each team as they exist now on Bet365, and our model has then ranked them into tiers and given a probability to whether that market goes over or whether that market goes under. And that's where we're going to get into now and look at the big picture and the landscape. Obviously, we know there's 27 rounds. Each team plays 24 games. So, we have a ceiling. A team can't win more than 24 games, and a team can't lose more than 0 games. Can't lose more than 24 games. And over multiple years of NRL footy, Jez, we have a pretty good knowledge of where teams generally end up. A premiership, a minor premiership winner, normally will win around 18, 19 games, something like that, unless it's a really standout season. The wooden spoon, generally around 6 or 7 games, I think they're winning. So we have what we call then a distribution of where teams generally end up on a normal NRL season. And then all the teams then filter in between that to add up to the total amount of wins that will come over a season. Anything standing out straight away, and just how we're attacking the big picture, the gap between the highest and the lowest, or the top teams, the bottom teams?
No, well, it seems pretty much like that now. But for me, if we're talking about just by looking at the numbers, almost fresh now, we're talking about a team winning the premiership at about 18 wins. There's nobody really projected here in the market lines to hit that amount, even though that's sort of been the standard. And then I guess you get down to the sorry old Titans that are at 7.5. So that's even a little bit overzealous, maybe for a team that's going to get the wooden spoon to even reach that amount of wins.
Such a good point you bring up there, mate. Because when you look at the teams that over or that win the minor premiership and the teams that win the wooden spoon, or if you want to call it that,
Hmm.
generally their seasons are outstanding, and outstanding can mean both positive and negative. So they're they're
Never
winning.
heard the Titan seasons these days being called outstanding, man.
They're winning, everything is going right for them. So those one score games are falling in their favor. Maybe they're able to avoid major injury crisis. So that's why, a minor premiership season is around that number, but it's not common for any team to have that. It's common that it happens in the league most years, but it's not common for any one team to have that, because it means everything has gone right. So to predict that, or have that on a bell curve of distribution, and you say, okay, right at the end is that 19 win season. It's such a low odds to get there that it doesn't happen very often for any one team. That's why the Penrith dynasty was such an amazing statistical anomaly, because they just kept doing it despite numbers. But really good pickup there. We see, as you kind of alluded to, the difference is 7.5 to 16.5. I think was the top one for the Broncos. So not a lot of space between the top and the bottom, which is quite normal for NRL because it is such a volatile competition, Jez. The bad teams beat the good teams on a regular basis, on a week to week basis, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we saw how sort of compact I think the middle of the competition was last season, wasn't it? Like like the whole season went down. Say from 4 to 12 was just intense all the way to the final round. So it shows how I guess even the league can be, because teams are winning when they shouldn't be winning and also losing when they shouldn't be losing. So
Definitely so. All right. So we have this list, and you can go on to bets.com.au and check it out. I'll put the link in the description of this YouTube video so you can get to each one of these articles. As I said there, on the right-hand side, we have tiers. So tier one is what we would say is one of the most confident positions that you can take on these win totals. Generally, the probability is above 70%, I think, in all of these, which we know in a betting world, you want to get over 54%. If you can get up to 60 or 70 probability or win rate, then you're looking really good. So out of these tier ones, we've got Brisbane Broncos under 16.5, Cronulla over 12.5, Dolphins over 12.5, Titans over 7.5. The Manly one you touched on, we're going to get back to that. Parramatta, Penrith, South to all go under, and then St George to go over theirs. You already said it. The Manly number is one that is over and it stands out to you. Can you give us a bit more feeling about, from a punting perspective or a fan perspective, why this one really stands out?
now I think it's a lot of it's, I don't know, the number it feels like for the market, even though it's based on statistics, it feels like it's so low because of the loss of Cherry Evans, and maybe not taking into the account the influence, like I said, of Jamal Fogarty. And then you've even got Docker Clay that comes in as well to give them a boost, which they needed. It feels like they lost some guys, but they replaced them with almost, you could say, better talent, or talent that can certainly influence them going up. And then it's also with them. I don't know. You roll the dice with the hamstrings of Turbo, but if he just stays a little bit healthy and doesn't do any sprints on the streets in preseason or any silly buggers like that has sort of destroyed Manly's seasons over the last few years, where they've been sort of on the cusp of making the eight or just missing the eight, it feels like, for the last few seasons. We should see them go over. So it feels a lot like uh, that's a big influence in adjusting, though, and taking the over, which gives me more confidence even than the 79% that the model is actually saying.
So they are one of the top 4 picks. I have another article which is just the top 4 picks that I've pulled out of this one. Manly are in there, and I've put it here that the market feels anchored to their downside. So they're looking at specifically, there's so much that can go wrong, and everything's going to go wrong. So you look at, again, we're talking about the multiple things that can happen in a season for an NRL team. There's so many different outcomes that could happen. And we've run these models 10,000 times, Jess. 10,000 times we've looked at the Sea Eagles season and we've said, of all those 10,000 times, how often are they going under? How often are they going over? And based on their numbers and their stats from previous seasons, they're going over the majority of the time, and it's a pretty big majority. So
Yeah.
the market, the prediction, the feeling around Manly's playing too much in, I think, to this number. It's pulling it down towards their floor, whereas it should be more maybe up around 12 wins is just the general where they should land. If they have a really good season, it could be up to 15. If they have a really bad season, it could be 8. Okay, so it's
Mate,
the number they've got here is much closer to the floor than the ceiling.
I like how we just picked probably the most love-hate team of the whole the whole lineup of clubs in the NRL, and we're just, we're jumping on the Go Manly train. Not many people
Yeah,
that jump on the Go Manly train, especially if you're a Roosters supporter, huh?
that's it, mate. Well, I think the other one that's important here to look at is the Brisbane Broncos, and they
Yeah.
are also one of the top. Do I have them in the top 4? I don't even have them in the top 4, but they are a team that I think a lot of people will think, okay, they're going to repeat the performance of last year. They're such a good side, they should win the same amount or more. I think they won. Did they win 16 last year, or 16 or 17? I think. So it's right on that number. And you think back to how Brisbane played last year, and there were some games that they probably should have won, and probably some games they should have lost. So you're thinking that, okay, a lot of stuff went right for them last year. It was one, you spoke about it when we spoke to each other about this earlier in the week. A game against Canterbury, I think they came back from 20 points.
Yeah, in the wet. They just all of a sudden Canterbury shit the bed, and Brisbane won in the dying moments of the game.
So that's a win, and they got to 16. They fared really
If
well despite the
15 wins they had yet last season. So they're
yeah
even tipped to have, what, 2 more wins to hit the over.
yeah. They were decimated by injury. Adam Reynolds, Ezra Mann were injured. The Origin affected, but they handled it extremely well. They won quite a lot of games despite the injuries, which, if you look over NRL seasons for multiple years, when teams lose their playmakers, they don't generally win a lot of games. So if injuries affect this Brisbane team again in 2026, the likelihood, Jez, of them winning these games again is extremely low. They're going to regress back to the average, and that means the win total is going to go under. 80% probability in the model to go under 16 and a half.
Yeah, and I think a big factor in this, just from a lineup perspective, is Billy Walters is out until round 16 with an ACL injury. So you think the versatility that they had with Ben Hunt being able to come in and cover for Mam, to cover for Reynolds, that sort of halves combination was always strong because they had Billy Walters in the side, and now you've got Ben Hunt predicted to start at hooker, which he's an old body and having to make all those tackles. Is he going to last? He got KO'd in the final. So there could be some repercussions of that. And then all of a sudden, yes, you've got Adam Reynolds also aging, generally out for a few weeks during the season. And then you've got to cover Origin. And, I think there's a lot more things that can go wrong that push you towards the under for the Brisbane Broncos than thinking that all these things are going to go right and they're going to be able to cover. And then you've got the whole Payne Huss saga, and you don't know, that gives you, if you want some more emotional betting to the under, then that can definitely push you that way as well.
Yeah. There are three tiers to this betting, and we see on the article we only really have teams in tier one or tier three. No teams ended up in tier two, which is like a little bit of a lean in one way. Um, or sorry, not as strong as a tier one, but on the direction. Tier three is a little bit of a lean. So the market is essentially broken into two there. The only one that's a no bet's the Bulldogs, because it was just right on the money. See a 53% probability to the under. It's a flip of a coin. It could be one game is the difference, according to the model. One that I'm a little bit afraid of, it's a Parramatta Eels predicted to go under 12.5 at a 73% probability. The thing with Parramatta is a lot of this market value is based on the years of data that Mitch Moses was out for a long time. There's been quite a big uh, rotation of players on the roster, new coach. Parramatta could go over this total. I'm not sure if the model is strong enough in the Parramatta perspective to be so sure, so confident about an under of 12 and a half.
Mm. Yeah, like what did they hit last year? They had 10 wins last year. So it's pretty high, but you've also got to take into that consideration of how much of a different team they are with Mitch Moses. And then you're also getting in there with their player movement, Jonah Pezzett. So he is not a big name yet, but you realize the amount that he's actually done and the times when he's had to come in and play for Melbourne. They haven't struggled. We saw Melbourne, a lot of things go right, a little bit like Brisbane in the fact that they were able to win games when their origin players were out. Cam Munster out, Pezzett came in. Jerome Hughes out, Pezzett came in. So he brings a lot of that experience. So if that combination clicks for me, I think it's pretty tough to want to pick the under, even though the model to pick the under is actually three more wins than what they got last year. But you put Moses in for the whole year, they win three more games just on that. So yeah, I actually am on your side there of being a little bit, I don't know, hesitant with the Parramatta Eels.
Is there any other team in the NRL from last season that you thought they were unlucky to finish with that amount of wins? Like, doesn't have to be the exact number, but maybe you felt, oh, you should have been a top 8 team or a top 4 team, and that would have then worked out about that 13, 15 win range, or a team that maybe only won 10 games but should have won more, like a South, so whatever it could be.
Like, if I'm gonna be honest, I think the Newcastle Knights for me are a little bit of a team that you would have expected to do better just purely based on how good their defense was last year. A team usually, like the old saying goes, defense wins championships, but it certainly wasn't the case for the Knights. Like, they dropped off the cliff at the end of the season. But I think so many times when we were doing our write ups, I think we were even hitting a lot of the time on taking Newcastle Knights with the margin if they were as the underdog, and even picking opposition unders on their team totals because their defense was so strong, where the market was pushing more to their opposition side's attack. So I think they've also made some pretty big changes in their lineup as well, obviously bringing in Dylan Brown and Sandon Smith. So you think if that combination clicks, their attack They certainly have the weapons and the speed around them. You would then expect that they should be able to get a few more wins because they were losing these one-score games quite a lot. So if you think about, especially with the NFL and things like that, where we do quite big comparisons with these one-score games, teams that are usually just losing them eventually win the next year, and the teams that are winning these one-score games start to lose.
There you go. Heard it here. Look for a Newcastle Knights regression back up to possibly over 8.5 wins. Jez, we're going to move on to our sharp angles and locks for the 2026 season. There was something I wanted to say before that, but I've lost it in my head now. So let's just. It was something you brought up there, which I thought was good to just quickly touch on.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't happen very often. I guess that's why I just slipped.
Anyway, let's just go on. As I said, there is a page here which has my top 4 picks based on the modelling, and then I've given the reasoning behind it. South Sydney under 11.5. It's a very positive number on the model. I'm not entirely there myself, Jez. I think the Manly one is much better. And I think the Dolphins over 12.5 with the roster they're building. Herbie back on track. Katoa, there's Herbie's
You're
back,
so hot
right?
on Katoa. Is he your NRL man crush? I think you bring
You
him up a
actually,
lot. I
he's
don't
going to
know.
be a
Like,
Dally M Player of the Year within the next 2 years.
who did they bring in, the Dolphins? They bring in Cobbo, huh? And Brad Schneider. So they're maybe also trying to. I wonder if Schneider's expected to feature in the halves.
Will be interesting to see. But
Sean
have you got a
Sullivan
lock?
gone.
A lock. My lock is yeah, I like Manly for me. It's the lock. It has to be the lock.
I'm gonna scroll through and see where we're. Now, I like the under on Brisbane. I think it's way too high. You're expecting them to do better, get more wins than what they did last year. I just see that there's too much that can go wrong in Brisbane. Yes, they have it all together, and it might be a little last hurrah with Payne Haas, but I think there's too many things that can happen for them to not reach that 16.5 total. And especially thinking where they came from the year before, they even miss the 8? So,
Yeah.
What goes up must come down, and maybe I'm not expecting a Penrith dynasty from Brisbane like many other people maybe are.
Now I remember what it was I was going to speak to you about. I wrote these articles back at the end of January, last week of January. So they've been out now for just over 2 weeks. The numbers haven't moved. So the win total numbers are exactly the same for every single team today on the 12th of February as they were back then. But we have seen 3 teams with the odds shifting towards the over. They're shorter now for the over. Cronulla, the Gold Coast, and Melbourne have all now have shorter odds for the overs than what they did when I created and ran the models. Which, looking at the numbers, if we go Cronulla, we pick the over. Melbourne, we pick the over, and Gold Coast, we pick the over. So the market is moving in the right direction compared to what we modeled and what we picked.
So that's pretty much saying, right, that people are starting to bet the overs on those win totals, right? If it's starting to get shorter.
Yeah, if you think that the line or the odds are moving because of public money, then yes.
Yeah.
Could also
Yeah.
be that the betting companies are working through their models and maybe adding more information to them, and it's getting it closer to maybe going up another number, another win.
Who's betting on the Titans to get more than 7.5 wins? It must just be the Tino news that he locked in for the next 3 years or whatever, maybe. But
Never know.
I don't know.
New coach, new feeling. We've heard this before in the Gold Coast, right?
Every year, right? It's pretty much just the standard narrative every year. It's time. It's time for us.
Is
Right.
there any under? Oh, you picked the under. You picked Brisbane as the under. I've picked Manly as
Yeah.
the over. I'm staying away from the Bulldogs. It's right on the money, and I think that's probably, um, yeah, the top three picks. Have you found anything else in the table there, Jez, that you like?
Like they're the main ones, obviously with Newcastle as well. Um, Penrith also, I don't know, it's real high, but it's
It's
hard
at
to, I think.
81% confidence for Penrith to go under that
Mm,
number.
yeah, but it just feels like they had sort of. It felt like a lot went wrong. Like they finished the year with 13 wins, but remember, weren't they like 8-1? I mean, 1-8 at the
Yeah,
start of the year. So
they
like
were
that's pretty
last on the lap.
scary. Yeah, yeah. Like yeah, what in round like 9 or 10 or something they were last. So I don't know. You think how bad it went for them at the start of that year. Like I don't obviously I expect them to definitely win more than they won last season. So that's 13. Like I think the combination with Blaze Talangi and Nathan Cleary started to come to life at the end of last season. So just think now Talangi's got he didn't even know his place at the start of last season, and now he's ingrained in the I don't know, in the wood there now because he's been there. He knows his role coming into this season, and they have had a pretty settled off season. It feels like I think Cleary come off an injury last year as well, so you don't expect them to at least start as slow as they did last season. So I don't know. I'm a little bit weary of the under maybe there, and they could still I don't know be sitting around that usual place of top two finish.
Well, soon enough, we will see as the NRL season, excuse me, gets raring going over the next few weeks. Some of this stuff will start coming to light, and we'll see in which direction the trends will take us. Jez, we'll be running the models every single week for the NRL and AFL at bets.com.au, pushing out articles, game previews, a heap of opinion stuff on the sites. So
Mm.
get over there and check it all out for free. We're going to put the links in the description of this video so you can get to the futures articles and check out the odds as well from Aussie bookmakers. Anything else, Jez, to add before we sign off?
Who did you tip in the All Star game this weekend?
Indigenous to win in a tight
Hmm.
one. Josh Adokar, first try scorer.
Ah, of course. He will. He'll do it. You can see it.
Yeah.
I'm
So
back. I'm backing you, buddy. 100%.
the thought around is that it's going to be a tight game. You're going to need a brilliant individual performance from a player to break it open. And the dude's in astounding form.
Mm. Love it.
Let's trot,
Nice to be
baby.
back this weekend.